Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar using business intelligence software to support maritime decision making. Today, we will be defining business intelligence in the context of the maritime industry, and we will explore how it can be utilized to improve ERP software. We are joined by Johanes Hapke and Christopher Knoderer from BASSnet. Who are experts in the field of ERP. We also have Carl Jeffrey, founding editor at Digital Ship, moderating the webinar. And of course, can I remind you that at the end of the presentations, we hold a Q&A session. So if you can leave your questions in the box provided by the platform, that would be great. So I'll hand over to Carl to introduce the subject. Thank you, Carl.
So our goal today is to help you understand what business intelligence is and how we're going to use it in shipping. So let's start by trying to define what we mean by the term business intelligence. So we're using it as a technology term. So we're not just talking about being intelligent about our business. So as a technology term, it means analysis and management of business information. Now, one point of confusion, we've also got this term artificial intelligence. I'm not even sure there's a clear definition of artificial intelligence, but we'll put that to a side for now because we're going to talk about analysis and management of business information. But so where in shipping would we want to do this? So it could be for maintenance, finance, safety, quality, crewing, project management, such as if we're doing a new build. Now, business intelligence is probably most for the senior managers who are going to use it to understand the company's current situation so they can make better decisions. We can analyze data and work out the key performance indicators, see if we're improving or getting worse in different areas, or if we get incidents, perhaps we can see what's causing them. So the theory of business analysis is there's 4 types, which is descriptive, which is where we are, diagnostic, which is the causes of a problem, prescriptive, which is working out what to do, and predictive, which is working out what might happen. Should stress that business intelligence is only as good as data that drives it. And in shipping companies, we don't have data about everything, but we do have a lot of data about maintenance, finance, crew, project, and safety. So that's a good place to start. So our speakers are from BASSnet, which is a company that makes cloud-based enterprise planning software and business intelligence tools for shipping companies. Its main offices are in Oslo, Hamburg, and Kuala Lumpur. We've got 2 speakers, Johanes Hapke, who's a business analyst manager with BASSnet. He's based in Hamburg and a former chief officer with Columbia Ship Management. He's got a master mariner qualification. And Christopher Knoderer, who's sales manager with BASSnet, also based in Hamburg. He's a project manager with ABC Maritime. So the structure of the webinar, first, Christopher is going to talk about business intelligence itself, and then Johannes is going to talk about the maritime application. So we should have about 35 minutes of presentation, so plenty of time for questions. Load them up in the Q&A box at any time. So I'd like to invite Christopher to give the talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carl. So I hope you are seeing my screen, the classic question during Corona time. Great. Yeah, thanks a lot, Carl. Communication. It's one of the greatest challenges, basically, of humanity, the transfer of information and intent to another person. And in no other industry is the challenge more prevalent as in the information technology. Saying that communication between users and developers is good would be clearly an overstatement. But there is a strong contender for the number 2 spot, and it is the maritime industry. Our separation between domains, between deck and engine, has transferred into our company structures. And while on board it's usually just fun and games, what we call the people on deck or what we call the people in the engine room, the problem ashore could be quite significant. While I was selling as a ship's mechanic, I was working on bridge and deck and in the engine, and appreciated the fact that only when we look at the ship holistically, we will reach our port of call safely. And that is what we are going to do today. We are, Johannes and I were going to try to do that. And we are going to try to bridge the gap between the IT and the maritime in order to help you to look at your shipping company more holistically with the help of business intelligence. This is not an IT course. is meant more as a primer for management on the terminology and the methods that are used within the maritime BI world in order to serve you as an inspiration on what and how to communicate your needs to your business intelligence provider. I will present the theory. Johannes will show you how it is translated into our maritime BI solution, the BASSnet BI dashboard. With this being said, let us get into it and talk a little bit about the theory of business intelligence. First, I would like to start with the evolution of business intelligence. How did we get there? Well, we started basically in the 1960s. Computers started to be used for efficient data processing in commercial settings, followed by the quick realization of what that technology could lead to, namely automated decision making. But with the increase of computational power and data storage in the 1970s, decision support systems have been established which use statistical algorithms and databases to process data. In the 1980s, Edgar Codd, a legend in database design, proposed his 12 rules, basically the Platonic ideal for relational databases, allowing efficient multidimensional modeling of databases. And during that time, we see a separation of operative and analytical systems, which lead to the concept of data warehouse, which was established in the 1990s. Here we store data from different sources in one location for analysis purposes. But with the new millennia, business intelligence enters the scene and turns the scientific concepts such as big data, data mining, and AI into one of the most popular buzzwords within the commercial IT business. Speaking of AI, Carl has already mentioned that we will disentangle that word a little bit from the business intelligence. So I will do that by basically having a little chat about what AI is and differentiating it then from BI. So usually most of the words, most of the buzzwords which you hear, such as data mining, big data, neural network, deep learning, belong all to the classification of machine learning. And machine learning is a great tool. It is very good in finding odd patterns. It quickly identifies outliers and ignores them. It is very flexible and very universal. And in the maritime industry today, it has actually already a couple of appliances. OCR, for example, invoice scanning, document reading, is a classic use for artificial intelligence, since the artificial intelligence is the technology, or the neural network is the technology which is used to identify what a letter A looks like. And from there, it is easy to identify the words and put them into data. But we can also use it for sensor evaluation, for example, for prescriptive analysis of your maintenance conditions or fuel performance. But what is important to know for AI, it requires a very large data set, aka big data, right? And those data sets need to be consistent and they need to be clean. And they need to be structured. And that structure is usually found in a data warehouse. So what is again the difference? Well, they have different requirements, AI and BI. The AI is very flexible, but requires a huge amount of quality data. But BI uses mathematical, especially statistical tools to generate insights. But both have the same foundation. They both try to turn data into information, and both are built on a very structured data warehouse. So the topic of data warehouse is very important. The structure might differ from the use case, but both of them basically require this kind of database. So what is actually a data warehouse? And probably you know that it is some kind of database, and you might be wondering, what is the difference between both? Now, a database, usually, technology-wise, they are sitting on a database, both of them. But a database, in the common sense, is usually used for the application. That means the application calls up data and it takes that information from the database. Usually an application just deals with limited amount of data. That increases the processing speed. You have a better response time, and that allows a database to be more effective. It also contains a lot of metadata, such as who created the record, perhaps certain markups, relevant IDs, and so forth. The data warehouse, on the other hand, is focused on analysis. And it is able to handle a vast amount of data from different sources and in a very structured, purposely for analysis structured way. And it also contains only the data which is relevant for the analysis. And what usually happens, there is a transfer from the database to the data warehouse. That's why the data warehouse rarely contains live data. Usually you do the transfer process once a day, right? Usually during evening hours, since they take a lot of capacity from your hardware. While the design of the data warehouse is a very interesting topic, it is usually not a topic for the management. But a very important technical feature which the management or the person who is designing the specification needs to understand is the so-called ETL process. And it is the process which transfers the data from the database to the data warehouse. Now that seems like a very straightforward process, and usually the users or the requirements creators usually consider it very simple, but it contains some very important factors where your input as a maritime professional is required for a good communication on what you need to the IT or to the developer. So let us break down a little bit this ETL process and see what it stands for. ETL stands for extraction, transformation, loading. The extraction part is basically dragging out all the relevant information from your databases, might be many, into a so-called staging area. In the transformation part, there happens the magic. That's where the rules are set on how to transfer, convert, map, aggregate perhaps the data, harmonize the data in order to then load it either into a data warehouse or directly into a so-called data mart. The data mart is basically the set of tables which is used for one particular analysis report. Now, why is it important that you understand how this ETL process works, especially the transformation part? Because herein comes your knowledge. And I just give you a little bit of a maritime example. Usually, let's say, for example, you would like to have a report on the fuel performance. Now, it is very important to understand the course of the ship, the direction of the wind, the direction of the current. But all those data points are stored in a different way in the database. You would expect, of course, from your paper logbook that you might have a relative wind. But since the relative wind is something which is calculated between the course of the ship and the direction of the wind, that data usually is not a data. It is usually not a data point which exists in the database. So it needs to be calculated for it to be meaningful in terms of fuel performance. And not only that, you need to convert the information from a course which is usually defined in degrees and a wind direction which is usually coming in cardinal values, north, northwest, and so on and so forth. Not to mention the impact of the direction, right? Wind directions are a little bit different and have different effect on the vessel performance than current directions, right? So you want to keep that in mind. And this is the knowledge which you really have to bring to your to your developer and explain them what you actually need. And that is the expertise which is required in order to have that good communication between the maritime and the development side. So, but let's say we have done all that. Now we want to ask the right question. We want to think now about what do we want to analyze actually in the first place? How are those data marts to be designed? What are they supposed to contain? Which questions do we want to ask? And for that, we go into analysis theory. So I'm going to explain quickly, very simply, what kind of types of analysis we have and how we can use them and what tools are in those different categories. So the first question which we might want to ask is, what is going on? It is what we call then descriptive analysis. We are simply providing information. But once we have that information, we would also like to know the why things are happening. So, and that is what we call diagnostic analysis. And here we are contextualizing the provided information from our databases in our data warehouse into getting more meaningful insights. But of course, knowing the past is good. What we are probably more interested for our decision making is what is going to happen in the future. And for that, we have predictive analysis. This is starting to help us to assist in our decision making. But what if we want to go one step further and we want to actually get a decision? We want to know what to do. For that, we use prescriptive analysis. And there we ask, what should we do? And that would allow us then to automate decisions. So I'd like to go through those four analysis types and give you a little bit of a context of how they can be used, what tools can be used. So let's kick off with the descriptive analysis. The first and basic requirement is, of course, that you have structured data which is connected to registered. BASSnet as an ERP system is, for example, very famous of having loads of structured data, all kinds of data points. But also what would be nice is if you can aggregate some data, you can categorize some data. And with it, once you fulfill those requirements, you have basically tools at your hand which allow you to then analyze it, like scorecard analysis. You can have your KPI analysis, you can do benchmarking, you can do timeline analysis. And in the maritime industry, those are already very common, right? You have your OCIMF KPIs, you might do it for your expense reporting, perhaps your vessel scorecard. An example looking at KPIs, for example, we would split them into lagging and leading KPIs. Lagging KPIs are basically those which have happened. You have your overdue jobs, you have your accidents reported, you have your defects. And leading KPIs are more for how many audits have been performed, how many improvements have been performed, in order to see what good things have happened in order to prevent any issues with defects or accidents. So usually people are focusing on, especially the quality department is focusing on leading KPIs. But how do we find leading KPIs and where do we get them from? Well, one way of doing it would be looking at diagnostic analysis. So here again, we require structured data in registers, and we need them especially connected to each other. That means we need context, like for example, in a report, or we need them connected in registers. That means we start here with grouping and tree structures of data. And the tools we can then use in order to do some diagnostic analysis are things like drill down, root cause analysis, cluster analysis, or even correlations. Now, MSCAT, for example, is a very popular method of cause analysis for in the maritime industry. But you can also do some correlations between, for example, experience and incidents, or vessel age and expenses, whatever you want. Now, a little alert, here comes a formula. This is an example of the Pearson correlation, right? How do correlations work? I mean, correlations are basically a formula. I'm not going to say simple, but anything what is can be described in a formula can be translated into an algorithm. And the result is basically a number between -1 and 1, which would mean a correlation if they are on the extremes, a negative correlation at -1, a positive correlation at 1. And if the result, the R, is somewhere around 0, then that means between two values there is no correlation. Let me give you a little bit of a practical example here. So here we see a couple of correlations for a vessel, and with no surprise, we see that the cargo weight and the displacement have a strong correlation of 0.9 between each other, meaning it's a very strong correlation between the no surprise there, right? That would be an example. Similar, you could take, for example, the mean draft and the aft draft. Of course, they are strongly correlated, right? There are other things which are less correlated. Perhaps ballast and trim, for example, is not correlated because usually trim is differently measured than ballast. So that would be a bad example. But you could get this very graphical interface quickly indicating where potential correlations and potential causations then could lie. You could also, of course, see that in a more graphical way with a chart like this, but you can see quickly a table view is much more meaningful than certain trend lines of how they develop. But let's move on to the next type of analysis where it gets more interesting, predictive analysis. Again, structured data is here very important. But while mathematical approaches were good for the rest, here we have to add a good understanding of the meaning of the underlying data. What do we analyze here actually? And to understand where correlations might not be equal causations. That's where maritime expertise comes very handy. But once you have that, once you fulfill those requirements, you have great tools in order to do forecasting, to do scenario analysis. But here you could already apply machine learning, for example, like a random forest application, but you could also do so-called polynomial regression. Now that sounds like a very scary word, but it's a very useful tool. Actually, I'm just going to show you the simple one. It's a simple linear regression. It's basically figuring out what is the formula in order to describe a specific pattern within your data. And that could be, of course, used for your fuel performance. You could use it for budgeting. You could use it for risk assessments or cost-benefit analysis, and making things actually quite useful, a useful tool in order to analyze and do a little bit of a predictive analysis to see how things are going to move. And finally, we get to the prescriptive analysis, the holy grail of analysis. Again, structured data is always very important, but here you actually really need specialists who create the tools, and the tools which they are usually using is either really artificial intelligence at that point, or operations research, which is a methodical way, a mathematical way of how to approach those kind of problems of optimization. For example, warehouse optimization, less than a container load optimization, stowage plans. Operations research is quite often used. Or you could have a traveling auditor problem, which is a variation of the traveling salesman problem, right? What is the cheapest way in order to reach every point on a given map, taking into account the cost? Just to give you a quick example, and I promise you we are done then with the math, how operations research work. Basically, it's an algorithmic shortcut to things. Carl Friedrich Gauss, the legend goes that he has found as a kid a very quick method of how to, for example, he got tasked by a teacher to add up all the numbers from 1 to 100. And if you would go logically, you would just add 1 + 2 + 3 + 4 + 5. But Gauss found an operation research method, a solution to that problem. And he basically summed the highest and the lowest number, which added up to 101, divided the highest number by 2, 100 divided by 2 is just 50, and multiplied those and got then the result, which is then to that question very fast, much faster than his other students. So, and that is just the approach. It's not really how things are being done in operations research, but the methodology, the thinking about solving this problem is basically here. And using that, you can really optimize everything, and you can evaluate how you can further optimize your processes. But that's it for me. Now we take it down a peg. I hope you got an idea of how the tools are used, which tools exist in business intelligence. And now we are going to go from the theory into the practice. And I hand over to my colleague, Johanes Hapke. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Christopher. If you could stop sharing, great. I take it on from here. Hello?
Hello, you're not screen sharing anymore.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know what happened here. Let me try that again. I think I got kicked out here somehow. Are you able to see my screen now?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Great.
PDF. Yes.
I apologize for that. So I'm sharing now my PowerPoint slide. I'm online, is that right?
Yep, that's all fine. Yeah.
Okay, great. Then let's get into it. So yeah, I'll go into the more practical ways now of giving you actually the idea what you can then do with business intelligence in a maritime context. And I'll start off with a single slide, and then we have actually a live demo of our BI dashboard system, so you get some more tangible insights into that. Well, the benefits of business intelligence in the maritime context, first of all, it's holistic business insights. So that means instead of having fragmented data, business intelligence allows you to get different sources of data together into one data warehouse or into one data mart, and then analyze different sources of data together and basically generating one holistic view for you, which then of course comes with a lot of more insights into your operational data. Then secondly, of course, analytical trends are possible via business intelligence, and only by applying analytical trends you come to or that helps you then to get to the causes of certain effects. So that means, for instance, let's say you have a vessel with a constant speed, but over time, via those analytical trends, you can identify that, let's say, your consumption goes up. So then you can, by applying business intelligence, you can then obviously also identify when is the best time for hull cleaning or dry docking. Then also multidimensional analysis is one of the major benefits of business intelligence. So that means instead of having one-dimensional analysis, so let's say, what is the number of accidents which happen? Well, that's fine. That gives you certain insights, but you don't understand why they happen unless you have more insights and you have that side by side. So in addition to what is the number of accidents, you might want to know what are the root causes behind, what are the actions we are taking in terms of preventive actions, what activities may be performed while those accidents happen. So then you get a better understanding, okay, where are our problem areas? Where do we need to actually take actions? So that allows, or multidimensional analysis allows you to do so. Then another item is scalability, and I mean that from two different perspectives. Firstly, it's the obvious time scalability. So it could be that you're for a certain report, you're interested in an annual view, but then tomorrow you would rather see a view by quarters or a monthly view or even a daily breakdown of your data. So that kind of scalability, and which you then can also be achieved by the end user easily. That is one of the benefits. And the second part, what I mean by that is basically that you can go one level up instead of just comparing, well, this is the vessel and that's the situation. You can bring it one level up for the line management and fleet and top management of a company. And you can compare vessel groups, vessel types, different business units, offices, or pools against each other. And then that means instead of going vessel by vessel at all times, you can actually then have a view on the different business units and their performance. And then, of course, well, that comes together basically with the multidimensional analysis, also a better understanding of the cause and the effect. So why do we have the accidents? Because maybe certain activities are performed, and then this poses us to a higher risk of certain, for instance, accidents happening, and what type of accidents are happening, and so on. So that is then, of course, the benefit of better understanding the causes and the effects of your operational data. And all that together, of course, leads and ultimately should lead you to facilitation or facilitating decision making for you. So in the end, it's a tool for you. The human, of course, always stays in charge. You make the decisions, but business intelligence can be a tool for you in order to facilitate that decision making for you. So now, but enough about the slides. So let me open our business intelligence solution here. So that is our BASSnet BI dashboard. We see here the opening screen, and the solution is basically our business intelligence tool. And it is structured. I'm waiting here for my server. Well, we have structured it into certain major categories for the operational analysis. So you have a category for management, then there's safety and quality, procurement, technical management. There's human resource, finance and administration. And now I'm opening a report for you, and we can have a look into a particular vessel scorecard. So that is a report which will deal with basically KPIs, predefined KPIs on a vessel basis, which then allows you to see on a monthly performance, or you see the monthly vessel performance here. So yeah, let me go zoom into this a bit. So we see here now a monthly performance of a vessel. So it's a card view, basically. We have the count of near misses, so the LTIs, so the lost time injuries, total recordable cases here, vetting observations, detentions which you received, port state deficiencies, overdue jobs from maintenance. So coming back to the holistic views and also the different sets of data which you can combine, and also the off-hire days. And now for each of those KPIs which have been defined here, you get your actual, obviously. You can set a target value, and based on the comparison of the actual versus the target, the system will calculate a score for you. And that score then is being calculated for each of the KPIs, which then results into a total average score for that vessel for this month. So this is basically the average performance, average monthly performance of that particular vessel. And now this average score is put into relation or into comparison against other vessels, which then leads to a certain ranking. So our vessel, MT Asian Feeder number 2 here, ranks as number 2 out of 29 vessels based on my filtering, etc. I get this kind of information. And then if I would like to drill deeper, there's a ranking view. I will not go into it now due to time constraints, but then you can actually compare different business units against each other's based on the KPIs which you have set and the resulting scores. So then you can also see how your different business units are performing on those KPIs on a higher level. Now, it could be that you would like to send out, this report could be that you would like to share it. So there are options also for you that you can send this report out via email. Let me just quickly do that. And the moment I send this out, I'll receive now an email alert on this, which allows me, first of all, to drill down back into the report, so I can share the report. The other person can drill into the BI report and take their own analysis. But that comes, of course, also with a PDF, which then allows you to have a quick look via the PDF. Now I'll have a look into some other reports, just giving you certain examples here of what is possible. So this one here is now a fleet world map, which gives you information about the vessels as per your list and the location of these vessels on a world map scale here. And we see then the vessels, and you can hover over the vessel to understand maybe certain voyage information. Okay, so you see the port of departure and port of arrival, you get the speed and draft and distance to go and course, etc. And all that data comes then in this sample now from the noon reports here. So you get an update on the data. And that's, of course, quite similar to AIS, but with the business intelligence solution, you can do a lot more because it doesn't end here. In the end, I can now click on the vessel here, and I can drill into the vessel, which gives me more details about that particular vessel coming from my ERP system. So that means, for instance, I see the crew on board here now with the crew images and the names and the sign-off information, for instance. So I also know how long the crew is going to be on board. I get the ROB and consumption information about the vessel here. The voyage schedule is available. I have also basic vessel information here, certain information about overdue certificates, for instance, and I can also bring up noon information here, so the latest reported speeds and consumptions, etc., in detail, the distance to go, weather information reported, and so on. So all that is available basically with one click. And I can also drill down further. So let's say I'm interested to see the profile of that particular master now, because I want to handle his handover and sign off. So you can click on that, which then leads you into the HRM profile of that particular crew. And then you see now the crew profile here, right, with all the different information and the certificates, etc., etc. So that's now a drill down into BASSnet as a ERP system, where you can then take further actions. I'll move on. I'll show you some other reports as well quickly before we come to the Q&A. So another one I'd like to show you to get an understanding of the holistic views you can achieve is a comparison or performance comparison report. In this case now, it is about audits and inspections and different KPIs on that, but then also with the ability how you can basically switch the views, and you can bring it one level up, or you can drill down one level to see further details. So yeah, this sample here basically now shows you certain KPIs. So the number of audits, let me zoom in, the number of audits and inspections performed, the number of findings reported, the clean audits and inspections recorded, the findings per audit inspection as a rate. So you get certain KPIs here on that. And then you have on top, you have your flexible date range filter. So you can set the filter to any particular date range. And the moment you do that, of course, the data will update in a live format. In addition to this, you can, of course, also flip the view. So right now we are comparing our internal audit performance versus the external audit performance. But it's possible with one click to change that. Let's say you want to compare the different offices against each other if you have many. In my case, I have just one, but maybe I want to compare the pools or the vessel groups. So you can basically change the view within the report based on the user in order to then bring it to that level of interest which is relevant. So for the management, it might be of interest also to compare different vessel groups, or you want to compare different vessel types. And then you see the different performance of the different vessel types now here, right? Or I can bring it, of course, also to the vessel level. So that is up to the end user in the end. Now I'm comparing here vessel by vessel, and I get the comparison now here. And then in addition to that, of course, you can apply filters in general for all the reports. So let me do this on the vessel type as a sample. So we can say, well, I'm just interested maybe in the offshore vessels now. So I'm taking AHTS and FPSOs and so on. So you make a selection here, and based on the selection, you see that the data will update instantly in order to display your area of interest to you. Those filters can, of course, also be saved, and you can run them as a favorite then each time you open the report. Yeah, what else can we do? Now, this is, of course, well, this is a date range view, but it doesn't give you the trend view, right? So in addition to that, it could be of interest also to come to a trend view. So, of course, that's also possible. So that means we can analyze the data in a trend perspective, and then we can see our performance over time, be that on the internal external split now here, or on the vessel group split, or whatever, or vessel performance over time. And now you see here, this is an annual performance, right? We have 2016 and 18 and 20 and so on. But it's possible, of course, to drill down into that. So I can come from the annual view, I can switch to a quarterly view of a particular year. And from a quarterly view, I can switch to a monthly view in order to get the performance by month, for instance. So all that is quite flexible, gives you quite a lot of options to really operate and use those reports the way you need them. Another thing I'd like to highlight is also the flexibility on modifying a report. So, you know, we all know from the past that, you know, ERP systems in general are quite rigid. But with those business intelligence solutions, it's possible, of course, to edit on the fly basically a report. So what I mean by that is basically that you can change a report. For instance, you can change a report, and let's say from a pie chart, you make a donut chart or a bar chart based on your preference. So that means there are edit options available in the BI dashboard for you here in order to customize the reports, to take out a column, for instance, if this column is of no interest, in order then to update the report view and the UI according to your needs. Yeah, so let's see if the report will load, and I will quickly show you that. Well, then we come back to that. That's also okay. Okay, here we are. So there's an edit option here, right, which allows you, let's say we want to change the pie chart to something else. So I can go into the edit mode, and it is really easy. Select the chart. You choose, let's say this one should be rather a donut, or I want a tree map, or I want something else. So you pick and choose what kind of format you need, how large the chart should be, etc., etc. So which then gives you the options to really customize also the views of those BI reports. So that would be a quick look into the BI dashboard as our solution for business intelligence. And I'll have another short 2 slides here before I hand back to Carl. So a bit about the backend technology. How do we achieve that? That might be also of interest. Well, the data which you've seen here now comes from the BASSnet servers mainly, of course. It's the BASSnet database behind that with the ERP system. And then we run the ETL process, like Christopher mentioned, to extract the data and put it into the data warehouse. But it is also possible to bring in third-party databases so that you can have your own data warehouse where you can mix and match data from different sources and then still use this BI dashboard as the tool with Microsoft Power BI embedded as the core engine. So that's the integrated solution which we are applying here in order to run those reports. And these BI reports can be either standard BI reports, as you have just seen it. So we do have a library which we offer of BI standard reports, which is basically an ever-growing library of those reports. Of course, you can also customize, or we can customize reports for you. In addition to that, also a customer can create their own BI reports and still run that via the BI dashboard. And then you have controlled access. That's also something which I didn't mention yet, but I think it's quite important. First of all, of course, is concurrent access to those BI reports. Second of all, you have full control on that. So who is supposed to see what kind of BI reports, who is supposed to see which vessels, all that can be controlled by the administrator, of course, of that tool. And then you can have reports available for management. You can have reports available for line management or office users, but also for external stakeholders. So thinking about, for instance, from a ship management perspective for vessel owner reporting, right? I mean, you can have BI reports available, then just giving you an extract of the data which you would like to share, and they can just log into the, open the URL and log into the platform in order then to see the status of the vessels. So that's about the backend technology in short. And this is now my last slide. The benefits are, well, highly structured data, which is being provided. It's a maritime-centric data warehouse design. And we have the capability of drill down also into the records, as you have seen, into the BASSnet records, as you have seen it via the HR profile of the master. Then we can bring in third-party data. That is possible too. And that comes of course with cloud and extensive service. And there is a data access control, as I just mentioned, so not everyone can see everything. And lastly, there are BI reports for third parties possible, like vessel owners in my example. So yeah, thank you for listening, and I'll hand back to Carl for the Q&A session.
Oh, that's great. Okay, so we've got about 12 minutes left. There's five questions. I've read 4 of them. There's very, very interesting. Then the question that I'd like to start with, I think Dougal Goodman is sort of pointing on this, that that business intelligence can only work with the data it's got, but we need to use our human intelligence at the same time to understand what it doesn't have. And that doesn't mean we should dismiss all of this, because it's enormously useful. But one example was with the coronavirus, when we had all this useful data on business intelligence from our governments, but it didn't tell us the people who had got coronavirus but never tested themselves. But these are just human intelligence things. So Dougal is mentioning you don't directly know if a ship is about to have an accident, and you don't directly know about near misses unless the shipping company is reporting those, and they may or may not be doing that well. I don't know if there's any comment. I mean, I guess that's sort of summarized it for me, but I don't know. I guess this is massively useful, and it's becoming more and more useful all the time. But also, we need to be aware of things that aren't in data that this doesn't show, I suppose. I don't know if you have any thoughts you want to add to that.
Oh yeah, I think yeah, there are definitely a couple of things which you can basically pull out, and I mean that is really the challenge in business intelligence, to figure out how you find the data, how you find correlations, especially I mean, correlations is very, very useful to identify. Sometimes it's not only interesting to get the right result, sometimes it's interesting to get the wrong result in your analysis, because that is a strong indicator usually that something is wrong, your data is off. And that is a point of where you can start then your analysis in order to further investigate. Now, if you want to really figure out what potentials are, of course, you need to try to pull in then that data. You need to try to figure out how you can get that data. Perhaps you have to have some alternative analysis. I mean, the entire concept of why we report near misses is because we know that X amount of near misses are going to result in an accident. And below the near miss is also what we call the safety observation. So there the same approach comes along, right? We have the safety observations, you report that. And even if you have an accident, something might have happened, you have some losses, but you might have some potential losses in there. You might want to record that too. And if your data seems to be off, might be a good point looking in how you record your information in order to get that data in there and then to evaluate it, right?
Yeah. Johannes, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think it's well, I think it's also, there's of course always there are things which are difficult to grab. I mean, whatever is of course not reported is difficult to bring into a business intelligence solution, obviously. But bringing, for instance, together accidents and near misses and safety observations into one, and non-conformities, etc., into one view is definitely the right step forward, because only if you have also a meaningful number of data, you can start to really analyze it. And thankfully, majority of the companies don't have that many accidents happening. And still there are a lot of high potentials, or there are some high potentials, but a lot of non-conformities and safety observations. So you need to bring that all into one picture and then start analyzing. And that's, I think, the first step forward. Obviously, there's always, let's say, a shadow sector where things are not being reported, which remains a challenge to get to basically the entire view. But I think by bringing everything together, this is the first right step to start analyzing that.
Yeah, and so there's an interesting question from Amy Parks. I think she's a machine learning engineer in the maritime sector. So she's talking about causal analysis, but I was thinking perhaps the right answer is that that's the machine learning part, is spotting what causes what. I mean, this is not, I mean, you can use causal analysis if you use your human intelligence together with it. So an example with the coronavirus, we saw the cases going up and down and different government policies, and governments trying to work out which policies were making the cases go in the right direction. But that was a very human analysis part used together with the business intelligence. I don't know if there's anything, any thoughts you have on that?
Yeah, I think there is, of course, the approach of root cause analysis, where you start to categorize it's part of investigating basically what is happening, and categorizing that, and basically seeing then from there what has happened. But again, this is part of exactly this a more diagnostic analysis approach, where you would like to look into how things are actually working together, right? So where the cause is. So you could go again using correlation analysis. You could identify causes, so connections between two data sets, and then identify, okay, look, there is a correlation. Let's figure out if there is also a causation between those two. And that is basically how you would do your cause analysis if you don't have it pre-categorized, like, for example, in MSCAT, which is also a cause analysis technique.
Yeah, okay. So there's two sort of technical questions about the software from Natalie, who I think is from Stolt, and Francisco, who I think is from Huawei. So Natalie is asking, which version of BASSnet does the BI dashboard work with? And Francisco is asking, where does the data come from? Do you want to maybe take those together? Maybe more for Chris, is it? Do you think?
Yeah, or
Johannes.
It doesn't matter. So yeah, it's the current BASSnet version called 2.11. So that is the version which has the BI dashboard as part of it. And where the data comes from, well, in this example, which I have shown you, it's the data coming from BASSnet as the ERP system. So from the different modules, we have seen data from the crewing module, we've seen it from the safety and quality modules, from maintenance, and so on and so forth. So the data comes basically from BASSnet as a system in that sample. However, it's also technically possible, like I mentioned earlier, to bring in also other sources of data. And you can also mix and match the data. So you can have your ERP system data plus some external data source in order to generate holistic views.
Okay, so then we've got a question from Dougal. So kicking with the same theme as stuff you don't have on data, he's asking how to measure leadership. I get quite involved with a magazine tanker operator with OCIMF. They do quite try hard to measure leadership and processes, nothing to do with business intelligence, but having people on board who know what to ask for. I mean, I suppose the main point here, coming back to what we had before, is that you can't have everything in business intelligence, but we're trying to use useful stuff with the stuff we do have. I don't know if you want to.
Yeah, I think those, especially those more soft skills. Let me put it that from a company perspective, soft skills such as leadership are of course very hard to define. It's very hard to get, because mainly is what is leadership? How do you make it quantifiable? How do you want to evaluate your leadership and basically your effect? Now, if you want to take it from a safety perspective, you see, okay, there is something wrong in terms of leadership. Now you're wondering probably what kind of leadership. You have to define that. You want to look perhaps at how the leadership on board is, or how is the leadership in the office, or probably combinations of both. Right, so you would like to analyze those, you would like to have a look at those, but you have to put them into some quantifiable parameters, right? The purpose of BI is basically giving you tangible facts on which you can act on, right? But for that, you have to go beyond feeling. So you have to take that word leadership, figure out how you define it, analyze what you want around, and get then the BI report to get you those data sets, and then score them, for example, in a scorecard for leadership, right? You could do that. That would not be crazy to do, right? To give a scoring on leadership. How well are we doing based on X, Y, Z, smart, right, parameters.
Imagine management everywhere will always have a range of different tools they use to understand what's going on, including talking to people and and tools like this, isn't it? So it's a question of knowing what works. So it's an interesting question. I've never. Yevgenija Deljanova is asking, can you make your own reports? I think Johannes, I think you showed this. You can generate your own reports and customize them.
I mean, true. I mean, basically there are three options. Well, we do provide a standard set of, or standard library of reports, which is an ever-growing list, basically. In addition to that, yes, you can create your own reports, and you can also ask us to create customized reports for you. That is possible, provided somehow, of course, the data has been transferred into the data warehouse. That's, of course, the requirement. But once the data is there, you can also create any kind of report and use any kind of chart, as I have shown. So that's definitely possible. Yeah.
Right, and a last question for Chris. I was a bit concerned about your extract, transform, and load, because shipping data changes by the second. You know, the maintenance task gets done, and I mean, have we really got to move all this data into a separate system every time something changes, or do we just do it periodically and then analyze it in a kind of batch? Is that a
usually when you analyze that data, you basically move it once a day. As I mentioned, you move the data from your data sources into the data warehouse, and then you analyze it there. But you really analyze then the entire batch. So you analyze it from the beginning of when you started, and you analyze everything coming from that. But it's really then up to you which periods to pick, because you really want to know, where do we start, where do we end, with where did we take specific actions. Perhaps you want to just analyze it in a period, but basically you have always all data available since you have started recording a specific data point. So that will always allow you to basically go back in time, analyze, further analyze, reanalyze, create new reports in order to figure out what can be done there. So you have always the full set. That's the purpose of the warehouse.
Oh, well, that's fantastic. Well, we're coming up to 11 o'clock now, so I hope we've given everyone an understanding of what business intelligence can do and help move it forward. And I shall pass back to Neff for the closing words. Thank you.
Hi, thank you, Paul, and thank you to our speakers for giving us an insight into business intelligence and how it can be used to better utilize the data that we collect. I just want to remind our viewers that we hold webinars regularly, and follow us on our website or on LinkedIn to keep up to date. We have a webinar coming up next week. So yeah, that's all from us. Thank you very much. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining.